When someone puts on a VR headset for training, the first few minutes are crucial. If the onboarding is overwhelming or non existent, or the interactions are confusing, the learning stops before it even begins. In this second video of our VR Training UX Design series, we're looking at how to move people from awed to acclimated. Like I said in the last video, there's this awe factor that happens whenever anyone enters a new virtual environment, and it can take a few minutes to get adjusted to a new world. And it's consuming a lot of your cognitive focus to take in all of those different sensory inputs. And then when you pile brand new learning content on top of that, it's going to cause information overload. And that makes it very hard to learn and retain anything useful. Remember, the goal of VR training is to learn the content being taught without being distracted, trying to figure out how to interact with the virtual world. So we want to give people time to acclimate to the new virtual world before starting any training content. This can be done in multiple ways. That's why it's a good idea to try out a bunch of different experiences to see how others have solved this problem, and to determine from that what's going to work for your specific use case. Not just so you can copy, but so you can get inspired. One of my favorite examples of this is from Car Mechanic Simulator. This is not a VR experience, it's actually a 2D game, but it can still teach us a lot. We can see that they've designed the onboarding environment to not be overwhelming. You spawn into a garage with no color except the items you're going to be learning, and you have full control over when the experience starts. You have time to look around and take in the environment, and you initiate the start of the experience by interacting with the highlighted object, which is glowing and in color. And for those that aren't aware, highlighted or glowing objects are a very common pattern in game design that's used to grab people's attention and let them know what they can interact with. The only thing that would have made this better is if everything was gray except the next object you interact with. I haven't streamed this experience yet, but Noun Town, which has a VR version, does something very similar. Almost everything starts out gray except for a few minor environmental elements. You pick up a gray object and learn about it, and as you learn the vocabulary, the object turns full color. And the environment slowly adds more color as you learn about the objects. This is a great way to reduce awe factor while also encouraging the learner to keep going so that they can make the whole room turn to color. Another important foundation is clarity. Basically, all of the in-world info, the visual cues, the audio feedback, haptic cues on the controllers, all of these things need to be clear, easy to perceive, and most importantly, not be intrusive or distracting or overwhelming. And this includes everything from typography and font usage, color contrast, UI design, tooltips, info panel placement. These things need to enable the learner to quickly figure out what's the most important thing for them to focus on at any given time. What are they supposed to be doing right now? Anything that's not relevant to right now needs to get out of the way. A really good example of losing relevant information when you need it can be found in Car Mechanic Simulator. You're learning how to do some basic maintenance on a car, and at the same time, you're still learning and getting used to which button does what on the controls. Things are glowing when you need to interact with them. It's going great at first. You have these little tooltips that tell you which button to use to complete the task. But then all of a sudden, these tooltips stop showing up, and you can't remember which button to use. Or so you think. It's actually a different button than what you were using before. They wanted to simplify the experience for you at first to make it less overwhelming, so the pie menu originally opens when you left-click on the item. However, when the tooltip disappears, it stops working. I only figured it out by rage-spamming mouse buttons. They changed it to a right-click. So now instead of learning the car maintenance, you're distracted trying to figure out how to complete the interaction. That can be really frustrating, or even infuriating, to be honest. And there are multiple ways you could fix this. The most basic fix would be to, of course, not change the interaction mechanic. The second most basic fix would be to keep the tooltips. Or you could set it up to where if the learner pauses for a certain amount of time, show the tooltips again. Or if you detect people spamming buttons on the controller, that means they're probably trying to figure out which one does the thing. If they do that, show the tooltips again. Or better, keep them persistent and give people the option to turn them off if they're used to them and they think it's distracting. But then there are also ways to design them so they're not distracting. And contextually, they should update based on what the learner's interacting with. Keep the relevant help there when they need it. That stops people from having to guess and keeps them focused on the thing they're learning, not fighting the interactions. And that's a great example of clarity, where You're making sure your signals are clear and easy to perceive. This video series only covers some of the basic concepts. You can learn more in our upcoming VR training and design course. Okay, the next big thing to think about is affordance, meaning the design or the form of an object should inform its intended purpose. People should be able to intuitively know how to interact with an object just by looking at it. Some really popular examples are from Don Norman, and they would be a chair before it's sitting, a doorknob before it's turning, and headphones look like they should just go on your head. It's built into the design, and you know how to use it just by looking at it. And then consistency ties into that, because people form mental models or expectations for how things should work based on past experiences. So the controls, the designs, the interactions, the mental models need to be consistent. And if they're not consistent, there needs to be a very good reason. As I've mentioned before, game design has a very heavy and direct influence on XR design and VR design in particular. So we can learn a lot by studying the mental models and best practices from game design. For example, you quickly learn how to differentiate enemies from friends. Like in this example, the enemy has a different color health bar above his head than you or your allies. And highlights are used to direct you to the next task or show you what's interactable. In different game genres, like platformers versus RPGs, you expect certain mechanics and controls and behaviors. There are expectations in visual language, and those mental models carry directly over into VR. And then when those patterns keep changing, like it does in that example with Car Mechanic Simulator, it causes friction or confusion or cognitive overload. And that, of course, in the context of training, gets in the way of people being able to learn the actual training content. And that leads into something that's very interesting to me. These mental models can vary by region or country. This is called internationalization, and I'll go more into that in the next video. In the meantime, check out my free Udemy courses to learn more of the foundational aspects of XR UX design. You can click on the screen right now to check out the full 43-hour VR training list. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.